Hello, friends. Welcome to Pillow and Pages, where gentle stories carry you into peaceful sleep. So settle in, get comfortable, and let the day fade away. You know, I've been thinking about those quiet places we pass through every day without really noticing. The hallway between the parking garage and the elevator. The lobby of your building after everyone's gone home. That stretch of sidewalk between the last streetlight and your front door. There's something about an empty space that was full of people not long ago. It holds on to the warmth somehow. Like the walls absorbed all those conversations, all that movement, and they're still letting it go slowly. Giving it back to the room in little waves you can almost feel if you stand still long enough. I think that's why some people like being the last one to leave a place. It's not loneliness. It's more like getting to know a room in a way you can't when it's full. The building breathes differently. The light changes. It goes from that busy, flat brightness to something softer, something that pools in corners instead of filling every inch. You hear things you couldn't hear before, the way a ceiling fan wobbles on the third rotation, the way a refrigerator clicks twice before it hums. Small things, good things, the kind of things that only reveal themselves when the noise falls away. And I think those small things are what make those places feel safe, even when they're empty, especially when they're empty. So tonight, I want to take you somewhere like that. Somewhere familiar and warm, that's been full of people all day and is finally gently winding down, the way everything does at the end of a good, long day. Let your shoulders do whatever they want to do right now. Maybe they drop a little. Maybe they stay where they are. Either way is fine. You don't have to direct anything tonight. Your body already knows how to do this part. It's been finding its way toward rest all evening. You might not have noticed, but it was happening. The way you chose the softer chair after dinner. The way your eyes started to feel heavy when the room got quiet. Your body was already leading you here. And your hands, notice where they've landed. On your chest, maybe, or tucked under the pillow, or resting open on the blanket. They found that spot on their own. They knew where they wanted to be before you gave it a single thought. Let them stay. They're comfortable. They've done enough today. Your breathing has its own rhythm going. It doesn't need your attention. It's been doing this all day without you thinking about it. And it'll keep going all night, so let it run on its own. Let the breath move through you the way water moves through a slow river, not rushing anywhere. Not fighting the banks, finding the path of least resistance, because that's what water does, and that's what breath does too. And the bed beneath you, really feel it now. Feel how it's holding your weight, not straining, not pushing back, receiving you. The mattress has already shaped itself around you. It figured out where your hips are, where your shoulders settle, where the small of your back needs a little more give. You don't have to adjust. You've already sunk into the right place. The way a stone finds its place at the bottom of a stream. Not dropped there, not forced, just arrived. And the warmth that builds between your body and the blanket, that pocket of heat that belongs only to you, it's already there, It was waiting, the way a familiar room waits for you to come home. Let yourself dissolve into that warmth. Let the edges of your body get soft and blurry, where you end and the mattress begins, where the blanket stops and the air starts. None of those borders matter right now. You're part of the warmth. You're absorbed into it completely. And from this warm, soft, quiet place, I'd like to read you a story. Tonight's story takes us to a shopping mall called Maplewood. Not one of those enormous complexes with 3 wings and a parking garage. It's the kind of place that anchors a mid-sized town. 2 floors, a food court at one end, a department store at the other. It's been here since long before anyone stopped to wonder exactly how long. Long enough that the tile pattern in the main corridor is the kind nobody picks anymore. Long enough that the fountain near the entrance has a particular sound that people from this town can recognize with their eyes closed. Long enough that the building has opinions about the weather. It creaks when the temperature drops, sighs through its vents when a warm front rolls in. And on this particular evening, the stores have closed their gates, the last shoppers have filtered out through the glass doors into the cool evening air, and the building belongs to the people who take care of it after hours. One of those people is a man named Frank. He's been here a while himself, and he's about to start his walk. Frank stood at the west entrance and listened. This was something he did every night without really meaning to, a habit that had settled into him over the years the way a creek carves a groove in soft rock. Slow and steady, and so gradual that by the time you noticed, it was just the shape of things. He'd stand there with his clipboard tucked under one arm, and he'd wait for the building to tell him it was ready. The last announcement had played maybe 10 minutes ago. Cynthia's voice on the PA, same script she'd been reading for as long as anyone could remember. Thank you for visiting Maplewood Mall. We will reopen tomorrow morning at 9. She always put a little extra warmth into the word tomorrow, like she was personally looking forward to seeing everyone again. Frank had told her that once, that he liked the way she said it, and she'd laughed and said she didn't even hear herself anymore. But she still did it every single evening. Now the building was doing that thing it did after the last voice faded, shifting. Not in any structural sense. Frank had asked the maintenance crew about that once, early on, and they'd looked at him like he'd asked if the building had feelings, which, fair enough. But there was a settling, a change in pressure maybe, or in the quality of the air. The echoes got wider. A dropped pen, 2 corridors over, would reach you clear as someone tapping on your shoulder. Frank pulled his jacket a little tighter, not because it was cold, more because it felt like the right thing to do when you were about to walk a building alone. And started. The west corridor stretched out ahead of him, broad and unhurried. The overhead lights had already stepped down to their evening setting, which meant the tile floor had gone from bright cream to something closer to warm honey. The stores on either side had their security gates halfway down, most of them. A few of the newer shops had glass fronts that went dark all at once, like someone closing their eyes. The older ones, the shoe repair place, the card shop with the little wooden display rack that Frank always thought looked like something from a church. Those still had their lights on behind the gates. They'd go off on timers eventually. Frank had learned not to worry about them. His shoes made a sound on the tile that he'd come to think of as his own particular music. Not quite a squeak, not quite a tap, something in between that happened only with his particular shoes, at his particular weight, at his particular pace. He'd tried new shoes once, a pair his daughter had gotten him for his birthday, nice ones, good arch support, the whole thing. And the sound had been all wrong. Too sharp, too businesslike. Like someone else's footsteps following him around. He'd gone back to the old pair within a week, and his daughter had given him a look that said she wasn't surprised. Not even a little. The benches along the corridor were empty now, their wooden slats reflecting the dimmed lights in long amber strips. During the day, those benches held the tired shoppers, the husbands waiting outside fitting rooms, the older folks who came to walk the corridors when the weather was bad outside. Frank knew the regulars. He'd nod to them, and they'd nod back, and nobody needed to say much because they were all just sharing the same warm, dry space. The fountain near the center atrium was still running. It always took another hour or so before the timer shut it off. And Frank had come to think of that hour as something private. A small gift the building gave him every evening. During the day, the fountain was background noise. It got swallowed up by the food court, and the kids running and the PA announcements cutting in every few minutes. You could stand right next to it and barely hear it over everything else. But after closing, the fountain became the loudest thing in Maplewood. Not loud exactly. Present, like it had been waiting all day for everyone to leave so it could finally be heard properly. You could make out each separate cascade, the way the water hit the first tier of stones and split into 3 little streams, the way those streams rolled off the edge and fell into the basin with a sound that was closer to a whisper than a splash. Frank had tried to describe it once to his daughter on the phone, and she'd said it sounded nice, in a way that meant she was also watching television. He paused beside the fountain, the way he always did, let the sound wash over him for a moment. There were coins in the basin. There were always coins, and he'd stopped counting them years ago. But he noticed them, pennies mostly, a few dimes catching the light at angles, 1 quarter that had been there since, actually, he wasn't sure how long. A good while. It had turned slightly green at the edges. He liked to think someone had wished for something real with that quarter, something that mattered to them, more than the penny wishes anyway. He checked the water level out of habit, not his responsibility technically. The maintenance crew handled the fountain and they were particular about it. But he checked anyway because he'd been doing it long enough that skipping it would have felt like forgetting to lock a door. The level was fine. It was always fine. But the checking was part of the walk, and the walk was the thing. The atrium ceiling opened up above him. 2 stories of empty air with skylights at the top that showed nothing now but dark sky and the faint orange glow of parking lot lights bouncing off low clouds. During the day, the light that came through those panels was the best thing about Maplewood. The whole center of the building turned into something that felt almost like being outdoors. Frank had eaten his lunch under those skylights more times than he could count, on his usual bench right over there. The one near the big planter with some kind of fern that never seemed to die either. A survivor, that fern. Frank respected it. The sound of the fountain followed him as he moved on toward the food court, getting softer with each step, but never quite disappearing. It would still be there when he came back around. The food court tables had been wiped down and the chairs stacked, legs up, 4 to a table, the way Maria's evening crew always left them. Frank approved of Maria's crew. They were thorough in a way that didn't draw attention to itself, which was the best kind of thorough. You'd walk through and everything would be clean and orderly, and you wouldn't think about it at all, which was exactly the point. The only time you noticed cleaning was when it wasn't done right. Maria understood that the menu boards were still glowing at a few of the counters. The pretzel place. Frank could never pass it during business hours without catching that smell, warm dough and salt. And even now, a ghost of it hung in the air. And the new place, the one with all the vowels in the name that he could never quite get right. Their menu board cast a softer light than the others, more orange than white, and it made that corner of the food court look like it was lit by candles. Frank thought this was a better version of the food court than the daytime one, honestly. Calmer, like a restaurant after the dinner rush, when the staff finally gets to breathe. He walked past the trash cans, empty, fresh bags, the liners tucked neatly over the rims, and checked the fire exit at the back. Locked. Green light solid on the push bar, not blinking. He wrote it on his clipboard in the shorthand he'd invented for himself years ago. FDEBK, K20118. Nobody else could read his notes. His supervisor had mentioned this once, casually, the way you mention something you'd like changed without actually making it an order. Frank had said he'd work on making them clearer. That conversation was maybe 8 years ago. He hadn't worked on it. The notes made sense to him, and he was the one writing them, so the system worked fine as far as he was concerned. The corridor that connected the food court to the east wing was the longest unbroken stretch in the building. Maybe 150 feet of tile and ceiling, and those pendant lights that hung down at even intervals like... Frank always thought of fishing bobbers, though he wasn't sure why. Since he hadn't fished in decades, he started walking and his brain started counting his steps, not because he'd asked it to, but because it did that sometimes. 40, 41, 42. And then the count dissolved on its own, fading like a radio station going out of range. And he was back to the quiet, his footsteps on tile, the distant fountain barely there now, the hum of warm air moving through vents somewhere overhead, steady as breathing. The escalator to the second floor had stopped running, which meant the stairs. Frank didn't mind the stairs. Not really. His left knee minded. It had started a running commentary a few years back, a low, grinding observation that got more detailed on cold days and damp mornings. But the stairs were only one flight, and the knee would settle once he got to the top. It always did. Complain on the way up, go quiet once it arrived. like a cat that yowls in the carrier but purrs the moment you open the door. The second floor was different from the first. Smaller stores up here. More specialized. His daughter would call them boutiques, said in a way that made the word sound French and slightly expensive. A jewelry place that had been here since Maplewood opened. Frank had watched 3 different owners run it. Same display cases, same soft carpet that muffled your footsteps the moment you crossed the threshold. A shop that sold candles and soaps and bath things in colors that didn't exist in nature, all wrapped in tissue paper. The scent from that place leaked through the security gate every evening, so this particular stretch of the second floor always smelled faintly of lavender and cedarwood. And something else. Rosemary, maybe. Frank breathed it in without slowing down. One of the small, unremarkable gifts of the evening shift. The second floor corridor ran in a wide loop around the atrium opening, with a railing along the inside edge, where you could look down and see the fountain below. Frank leaned on the railing, just for a moment, the way he always did at this spot. From up here, the fountain looked different. Smaller, obviously, but also more careful somehow. More deliberate. Like a little stage that someone had assembled with patience. Every stone placed just so. The water finding its paths. The coins winking from the bottom. He could see the full footprint of the building from this vantage. The corridors branching off like arms reaching in different directions. The storefronts going dark one by one as timers clicked off. And the pattern in the tile that you could only really appreciate from above. It was meant to look like something. Leaves, he'd always thought. Or maybe waves. He'd asked the building manager once and gotten a shrug that could have meant, "I don't remember," or "I never knew." Whatever the pattern was supposed to be, it had worn smooth in the lanes where people walked most. The high-traffic paths, buffed to a gentle shine by a million footsteps. Frank walked those same paths every night, adding his own small wear to the pattern, one circuit at a time. He stayed at the railing a moment longer. From below, the sound of the fountain drifted up, thinner from this height, more delicate, like something heard through a window left slightly open. The break room was at the end of a hallway that most customers never knew existed. Past the restrooms, past the custodial closet, with the mop and pine smell that had seeped into the walls years ago and would probably outlast the building itself. Through a door marked staff only that Frank had opened so many thousands of times that the handle had a bright spot exactly where his thumb always landed. He'd noticed that one evening, his own thumbprint worn into the brass, and it had given him a feeling he couldn't quite name. Belonging, maybe, or permanence. The idea that even small, repeated actions leave a mark. Inside, the room was small and perfectly adequate. A round table with a laminate top peeling at one corner. A few folding chairs, the metal kind that left a cold line across the back of your legs if you sat still too long. Frank had solved this years ago by draping his jacket over the back of his preferred chair, the one facing the clock. Not for any practical reason. The clock was digital and he wore a watch. It was more that the chair faced the right direction, and sometimes you had preferences that didn't need explaining. A microwave on the counter hummed faintly, even when it wasn't running. A coffee maker that Frank kept supplied from home. Nothing fancy, but better than what the company provided, which he'd tried once and never touched again. He hung his jacket on the chair and sat down, the familiar creak of the metal legs accepting his weight. His clipboard went on the table next to his crossword puzzle, the one from last Sunday's paper, which he'd been working through all week during his breaks. 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. 12 across was giving him trouble. 7 letters, place of refuge. He'd penciled in shelter and it didn't fit. He'd tried retreat and it was 1 letter too many. He'd come back to it. He always came back. The building was quiet in a different way back here. The hallway between the break room and the public areas acted like a buffer, absorbing the last of the mall's ambient sounds. The fountain was inaudible. The HVAC was barely a whisper. What he could hear was the clock on the wall, not ticking because it was digital, but making that faint electronic hum that digital clocks made when everything else had gotten silent enough. Frank picked up his pencil. The crossword grid was soft at the edges from being folded and unfolded all week. He filled in 14 down. Orioli. He was confident about that one, and let the pencil rest against the paper. His handwriting had gotten looser over the years. Not shaky, relaxed. Like his hand had stopped performing for anyone and was writing for itself now. The light above him was the warmest in the entire building. A single fixture with a yellowish bulb that nobody had swapped out for an LED yet, and Frank hoped nobody would. It threw the kind of light that softened everything it touched. His hands on the table, the pencil, the crossword with its black and white grid going gold at the edges. He thought about nothing in particular. The bookshop on the first floor that was closing next month, the one whose owner changed the window display every 2 weeks without fail. He'd miss walking past that. He thought about the sound of his shoes on the tile and how the building would make exactly the same sounds tomorrow night and the night after that, and how there was something deeply good about that, not exciting, not worth telling anyone about, just good. The pencil rested against the grid. His breathing had slowed without him deciding to slow it. And that's where we'll leave Frank tonight, sitting in his break room with the warm light above him, working his crossword 1 clue at a time, the whole building settling around him like a blanket being pulled up slowly. I hope you're settling too. Whatever today held, whatever it asked of you, it's finished now. It's done. You showed up and you did what needed doing, and now the day is over and the quiet is yours. Good night, friends. Sleep well. I'll see you next time.